A single decision, made in 3 seconds, by one woman, prevented the Roman Empire from ever existing. September 2nd, 31 BC. The Ionian Sea churns with the blood of 40,000 men as 2 fleets, representing the fate of the entire Mediterranean world, lock in a death struggle off the coast of Actium. History tells us Cleopatra fled, that Octavian won, that Rome's imperial destiny was secured. But imagine, just imagine, if in those critical moments when her fleet broke through the blockade, instead of retreating to Egypt, Cleopatra had turned her 60 warships around. Imagine if she had crashed back into the battle with the full fury of Ptolemaic Egypt behind her. Everything you know about the next 2,000 years of human history, every empire, every border, every language, every religion would be unrecognizable. Because on that September day, Rome didn't just face another enemy. It faced the last pharaoh of Egypt, the richest monarch in the Mediterranean, a woman who spoke 9 languages, commanded the loyalty of the East, and held the throat of Rome's grain supply in her hands. And if she had won, Rome would have drowned in the wine-dark sea of its own ambition. To understand what hangs in the balance at Actium, you need to travel back 1 year. Rome in 32 BC is not an empire, it's a corpse that doesn't know it's dead yet. For a century, the Republic has been tearing itself apart in waves of civil war. Marius against Sulla, Pompey against Caesar, the liberators against the Second Triumvirate, brother against brother, legion against legion, until the streets of Rome run with so much Roman blood that the Tiber itself seems to flow red. The Republic's institutions, the Senate, the consulship, the very idea of shared power, have become theater, hollow performances where real power is decided by whoever commands the most legions. And now, in this final act, 2 men stand as the last titans fighting over the corpse. Octavian, Caesar's adopted son and heir, cold and calculating, controls the West. Mark Antony, Caesar's trusted general and brother-in-arms, passionate and impulsive, controls the East. But Antony has made a choice that scandalizes Rome and gives Octavian the propaganda weapon he needs. He has taken Cleopatra, the foreign queen, the Egyptian seductress, the living embodiment of Eastern decadence, as his lover, his partner, his queen. And when 40% of the Roman Senate abandons Rome to join Antony's cause, when both consuls flee to his side, Octavian sees his opportunity. He doesn't declare war on Antony, his fellow Roman. No, he declares war on her, on Egypt, on the foreign threat. And in doing so, he transforms a civil war into a crusade for Roman survival. But who is this woman that Rome fears more than its own civil war? Cleopatra is not some frivolous seductress from a Hollywood movie. She is a Ptolemaic pharaoh, descendant of Alexander the Great's general Ptolemy, who has ruled Egypt for 20 years through assassination plots, civil war with her own brother, and the most dangerous political minefield in the ancient world. She speaks 9 languages fluently, including Egyptian, something no Ptolemaic ruler had bothered to learn in 3 centuries. She's a scholar who corresponded with the great minds of Alexandria, a mathematician who understood economics, a strategist who rebuilt Egypt's naval power from almost nothing. And she controls something Octavian desperately needs: grain. Egypt is the breadbasket of the Mediterranean. 1/3 of Rome's grain supply flows from the Nile Delta. Cleopatra doesn't just command armies, she commands whether Rome eats or starves. Her alliance with Antony isn't passion overcoming reason. It's strategic genius. Together, they control the entire Eastern Mediterranean, Greece, Asia Minor, Syria, Egypt. They command 500 warships and 100,000 veteran soldiers. They have the wealth of the Ptolemaic treasury behind them, accumulated over 3 centuries of taxing the richest land in the world. On paper, they should crush Octavian. And when they choose to make their stand at Actium, establishing their fleet in the protected waters of the Ambracian Gulf, they believe the trap is set. They believe victory is certain. They have no idea that Marcus Agrippa, Octavian's naval commander and the greatest admiral Rome has ever produced, is about to turn their advantage into their doom. Spring 31 BC. Antony's forces are camped at Actium, confident and ready, but Agrippa doesn't attack, he strangles. His fleet sweeps south, seizing the island of Lucas, cutting off Antony's supply lines. Then Patri falls, then Corinth. Like a python coiling around its prey, Octavian's forces systematically cut off every route between Antony and Egypt. Antony's army, trapped in the marshy ground around the Ambracian Gulf, begins to suffer. Malaria sweeps through the camps. Food runs low. Discipline breaks down, and then the desertions begin. First, a few soldiers slip away in the night, then whole units. Then kings and client rulers who had pledged their loyalty to Antony suddenly remember they have business elsewhere. Antony watches his grand army dissolve like salt in water. By late August, his 70,000 infantry have dwindled to perhaps 50,000, and those who remain are sick, hungry, and demoralized. His 500 ships. He can barely crew 230 of them. The rest sit empty, their oarsmen dead or deserted. Cleopatra's fleet of 60 Egyptian warships remains intact, well-supplied, and ready, anchored separately with their treasure ships nearby, their escape route kept deliberately open. The war council debates for days. Some generals urge a land battle, abandon the ships, march inland, force Octavian to fight on terrain that favors veteran infantry. Others demand they wait, rebuild strength, let Octavian exhaust himself in siege. But Antony, his pride wounded by the desertions, his judgment clouded by desperation, makes his choice. They will break out by sea. They will smash through Agrippa's blockade, reach open water, and sail for Egypt to regroup. It is a plan born of hope, not strategy. And on September 2nd, as the ships row out through the narrow straits into the Ionian Sea, that hope is about to be tested against the cold reality of Roman naval superiority. Noon, September 2nd, 31 BC. The moment Antony's fleet rows out through the straits, Agrippa's trap is sprung. You need to understand the mathematics of this battle to grasp how close it is. Antony fields 230 warships, massive quinquiremes and hexaremes, the battleships of their age, towering wooden fortresses bristling with soldiers and artillery. Agrippa commands 400 ships, but they're smaller, faster Liburnians, built for speed and maneuverability rather than ramming power. In a straight ship-to-ship contest, Antony's advantage in size could be decisive, but Agrippa doesn't fight fair. His ships swarm like wolves around Antony's lumbering giants, darting in to shear off oars, avoiding the devastating rams, using fire pots and grappling hooks. The battle spreads across miles of open water, breaking into dozens of individual melees. Antony's right wing holds steady. His center fights with desperate courage, but his left wing begins to crumble. Ships lose their oars and drift helpless. Fires spread across wooden decks. The screams of drowning men echo across the water. And then, in the midst of the chaos, as smoke and confusion reign, Cleopatra makes her move. Her 60 warships, held in reserve with their treasure ships, suddenly hoist their distinctive purple sails. They form into a tight formation, a spear aimed at a single weak point in the blockade. The wind is behind them. The confusion is total. And as Antony's battle line disintegrates, Cleopatra's fleet breaks through. In our timeline, this is where she sails for Egypt and the battle is lost. But imagine, right now, in this moment of quantum possibility, she doesn't run. She turns, and everything changes. In reality, Cleopatra sailed south and never looked back. Antony, seeing her fleet depart, abandoned his own men and followed her with 40 ships, leaving the battle in chaos. His remaining fleet fought on for hours before surrendering. It was a catastrophic defeat, a moment of cowardice that historians would debate for 2 millennia. But here in our alternative history, something different happens. As Cleopatra's fleet breaks through into open water, as Agrippa's ships pursue them expecting an easy chase, Cleopatra gives an order that freezes in the throats of her captains. Turn around, battle stations, full ramming speed. Her crews, trained to perfection in Alexandria's harbors, execute with mechanical precision. 60 warships wheel in the water like a single organism, oars beating in perfect synchronization. The treasure ships scatter to safety, but the warships become a hammer. And Agrippa's pursuing vessels, spread thin and disorganized, suddenly realize they're the nail. Cleopatra's ships crash into Agrippa's pursuit force from an unexpected angle, their fresh crews overwhelming tired Roman oarsmen, their rams finding exposed flanks. 8 Roman ships sink in the first 10 minutes. Agrippa's left flank, extended too far in pursuit, finds itself cut off from the main fleet. And then Antony, seeing Cleopatra's standard still flying, seeing Egyptian ships attacking rather than fleeing, makes a different choice too. Instead of abandoning his men, he rallies them. His signal flags snap in the wind, reform the line, press the attack. Suddenly, the momentum shifts. Antony's center, which had been holding desperately, surges forward with renewed fury. Agrippa's fleet, caught between 2 forces, its careful coordination shattered, begins to fracture. The afternoon sun beats down on a battle that is no longer a foregone conclusion. It's become a knife fight, and the knife is turning toward Rome's throat. Marcus Agrippa is arguably the finest military mind Rome has ever produced. He won the war against Sextus Pompey. He built Rome's first permanent navy. He designed the Pantheon. And now, watching his careful battle plan disintegrate, he does what great commanders do: he adapts. From his flagship, signals flash, regroup on the center. Tight formation, refuse both flanks. His ships contract into a defensive square, bristling with scorpions and ballistae, their marines lining the rails in solid walls of shields and spears. For an hour, this Roman fortress holds against wave after wave of attacks. Antony's ships batter against it and are repulsed. Cleopatra's fleet, tired from their earlier breakout, makes several charges but cannot break the discipline of Agrippa's veterans. The battle hangs in agonizing balance. Ships burn, men die. The water becomes so thick with debris and bodies that ships struggle to maneuver. But Agrippa has a problem he cannot solve with tactics: numbers. He started with 400 ships, but many are damaged, some are sunk, others are scattered too far to return. His defensive square contains perhaps 280 vessels now. Antony and Cleopatra, fighting together in coordinated attacks, can bring 240 ships to bear against him. The math is closer than it should be. But it's the other factor that dooms Agrippa. His crews are exhausted. They've been at their oars since dawn. They've fought for 6 hours straight. And Cleopatra's Egyptian crews, they're still fresh. As the sun begins to set, painting the Ionian Sea the color of blood and fire, Cleopatra's fleet makes one final, coordinated charge at Agrippa's northwestern corner. The timing is perfect. Just as they strike, Antony's heaviest quinquiremes crash into the opposite side. The defensive square cracks. Not a collapse, but a crack. 10 Roman ships are driven backward into their own formation, creating chaos. Marines fall overboard, oars tangle. And through that crack, like water through a breaking dam, Antony's reserves pour in. Agrippa sees it happen. He knows what it means. And he makes the hardest decision of his life. He orders the retreat. Agrippa's retreat is not a rout. It's a fighting withdrawal, a masterpiece of naval discipline. His ships break contact in good order, maintaining formation as they pull back toward their base at Corinth. But a fighting withdrawal is still a withdrawal. And as the sun sets on September 2nd, 31 BC, the waters off Actium belong to Cleopatra and Antony. They've lost perhaps 80 ships sunk or captured. The Romans have lost over 150. More importantly, they've lost the initiative. That night, as Antony's surviving ships pull back to the protected waters of the Ambracian Gulf and Cleopatra's fleet anchors in victory, the world holds its breath. In Rome, Octavian receives the news 3 days later. The reports are confused, contradictory, but the core truth cannot be hidden. Agrippa has retreated. The naval blockade is broken. Egypt's supply lines are secure. The Senate, already depleted by the mass defection to Antony, descends into panic. Food riots break out in Rome streets when word spreads that Egypt's grain fleet might not sail. Octavian's supporters begin to quietly liquidate their assets and make contingency plans, because everyone knows what comes next. With the naval blockade broken, Antony can resupply his forces, reinforce his army, and with Egypt's inexhaustible wealth funding the war, he can afford to wait, to rebuild, to choose his moment. Octavian, by contrast, is bleeding money. His treasury is nearly empty. He's borrowed against future conquests that now seem uncertain. His soldiers haven't been paid in months and are growing restless. In our timeline, Octavian pursued Antony to Egypt with the confidence of a victor. In this timeline, he's a wounded animal and the predators are circling. History is not made of battles alone. It's made of what people believe about those battles. And in the winter of 3130 BC, belief shifts like sand beneath Octavian's feet. King Herod of Judea, who had carefully maintained neutrality, suddenly remembers his old friendship with Antony and sends a tribute of gold and 5,000 soldiers. The cities of Asia Minor, which had been hedging their bets, now open their gates enthusiastically to Antony's tax collectors. The grain merchants of Sicily, smelling profit, begin negotiating contracts with Egyptian traders rather than Roman ones. Each defection is small, each betrayal is reasonable, but together they form a cascade. Octavian's coalition, held together by the assumption of inevitable victory, begins to dissolve. His greatest problem is money. Wars run on gold, and Octavian is nearly bankrupt. He's already confiscated property from Antony's supporters in Italy, imposed emergency taxes, melted down temple treasures. He cannot squeeze Italy any harder without provoking revolt. And he cannot pay his soldiers, the only thing keeping him in power, without money. In desperation, he summons his inner council. They consider, then reject, dozens of options. Attack Antony on land through Macedonia? Impossible without naval support to move supplies. Sue for peace and negotiate a division of the empire? Antony, emboldened by victory, will accept nothing less than Octavian's complete submission. Retreat to Spain and rebuild? That's just slow suicide. There is only one option left, and everyone in the room knows it, but no one wants to say it aloud. Finally, Agrippa speaks the unspeakable. They must attack Egypt directly. Not next year after rebuilding. Now, immediately, before Antony can consolidate his victory. It's insane. It's desperate. It's their only chance. Spring 30 BC. Octavian gambles everything on one final throw of the dice. He strips Italy of every available soldier, leaving the homeland virtually undefended, and marches on Egypt. It's a race against time and bankruptcy. His army moves fast, living off the land, burning its bridges behind it. There is no retreat, no fallback position. Victory or death. But Cleopatra and Antony have had 6 months to prepare. Egypt's borders are fortified like never before. The desert approaches are guarded by cavalry. The Nile Delta is a maze of defensive positions, and Alexandria itself. Alexandria has been transformed into a fortress that would make Alexander the Great proud. The city's famous walls are reinforced. Its harbors are protected by chains and underwater obstacles. The lighthouse, the Pharos, one of the 7 wonders of the world, has been converted into a military observation post from which Egyptian scouts can see Octavian's fleet days before it arrives. Cleopatra has armed every man who can hold a spear, recruited mercenaries from as far as India, and turned her capital into a killing ground. When Octavian's army arrives at Alexandria's walls in July 30 BC, they face a city that will not fall easily. The siege begins. For weeks, Octavian's forces hurl themselves at the walls. They're repulsed each time with heavy losses. His soldiers, unpaid and hungry, begin to grumble. Desertion increases. Disease spreads through his camps. And then in the 3rd week of the siege, Antony launches a sortie. His cavalry, hidden in the desert, sweeps around Octavian's siege lines and cuts his supply convoy from the coast. Suddenly, it's Actium in reverse. Octavian's army is trapped, surrounded, starving. The reversal is complete. And in his command tent, as food runs out and his soldiers edge toward mutiny, Octavian finally understands. He has lost. In our timeline, Octavian became Augustus, the first Roman emperor, and ruled for 40 years. In this timeline, he dies in a tent outside Alexandria at age 33 of dysentery and despair. The reports vary on exactly how it happened. Some say he took poison when he saw his army's final dissolution. Others claim he was murdered by his own officers hoping to buy mercy from Antony. The most credible account suggests he simply gave up, stopped eating, stopped giving orders, stopped caring, and wasted away in fever dreams while his army disintegrated around him. His death is almost anticlimactic. There's no dramatic final battle, no heroic last stand. Just a young man, exhausted and broken, dying in a foreign land far from Rome. Agrippa takes command of the remnants and negotiates their surrender. The terms are surprisingly generous. Antony, perhaps remembering that he and Octavian once fought together under Caesar, allows the surviving soldiers to return to Italy unarmed. Agrippa himself is given safe passage, though he chooses exile in Greece rather than return to a Rome that now belongs to Antony. The news reaches Rome in August 30 BC. The city erupts in chaos. Octavian's faction collapses instantly. His supporters flee, are arrested, or switch sides with impressive speed. The Senate, ever adaptable, immediately votes to recognize Antony as the sole legitimate leader of Rome. Statues of Octavian are torn down. His name is chiseled off monuments. Within weeks, it's as if he never existed. Mark Antony, the soldier who loved wine and women and war, the man who gave away kingdoms to his children by Cleopatra, the Roman who went native, is now master of the Roman world. And beside him, whispering counsel in his ear, managing his finances, corresponding with client kings in a dozen languages, is Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, and now, effectively, Queen of Rome. The world Cleopatra and Antony inherit in 30 BC is fundamentally different from the empire Augustus built. In our timeline, Octavian established the Principate, a disguised monarchy that maintained the fiction of republican government. He ruled alone, carefully balanced competing factions, and established a dynasty through adoption. But Antony and Cleopatra cannot rule that way because their power rests on a completely different foundation. They govern as a diarchy, a partnership of equals. Antony commands the loyalty of the Western legions and the Roman political establishment. Cleopatra controls Egypt's wealth and the Eastern client kingdoms. Neither can rule without the other. This creates a new kind of empire, one with two capitals. Rome remains the symbolic heart of the West, where the Senate meets and Roman traditions are honored. But Alexandria, wealthy, cosmopolitan, Greek-speaking Alexandria, becomes the empire's true center of power. It's where the treasury is kept, where policy is made, where the royal court resides. The empire's geography shifts eastward. The focus is no longer on conquering Gaul or Germany, but on securing the eastern trade routes. Resources flow to Syria, to Egypt, to Asia Minor. The West becomes, not neglected exactly, but secondary. This shift has immediate consequences. In Britain, the planned invasions are canceled. The island remains Celtic and independent. In Germany, the Rhine frontier is maintained, but not expanded. There will be no Teutoburg forest disaster because there will be no attempt to conquer Germania. In Parthia, instead of constant warfare, Antony negotiates a comprehensive peace treaty. He trades recognition of Parthian control over Armenia in exchange for open trade routes to India and China. The Silk Road flourishes under joint Roman-Parthian protection. It's a radically different vision of empire, one based on trade and diplomacy rather than constant military expansion. And it works, at least at first. But the partnership has a problem that cannot be solved by military victories or diplomatic treaties: succession. Antony and Cleopatra have 3 children together: the twins Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene, born in 40 BC, and young Ptolemy Philadelphus, born in 36 BC. Cleopatra also has a son by Julius Caesar, Caesarion, now 16 years old, whom she has declared co-pharaoh of Egypt. Antony has children by his previous Roman marriages, including 2 daughters by Octavia, Octavian's sister. The question of who will inherit this vast empire becomes the dominant political issue of the late 30s BC. Antony wants a Roman solution: adopt a capable heir, maintain the fiction of republican government, pass power to someone the legions will accept. Cleopatra wants a Ptolemaic solution: divine monarchy, her children ruling as pharaohs of a Hellenistic empire, power kept within the bloodline. In 34 BC, at the famous donations of Alexandria, they attempt a compromise that satisfies no one. Caesarion is declared King of Kings, supreme ruler of the East. Alexander Helios receives Armenia, Media, and Parthia. Cleopatra Selene gets Cyrenaica and Libya. Ptolemy Philadelphus receives Syria and Cilicia. Antony's Roman children are given honors but no real power. The ceremony is magnificent. Cleopatra appears as the goddess Isis, Antony as Dionysus, their children dressed as Hellenistic monarchs. Rome's eastern territories are divided up like wedding cake. But to Roman eyes, watching from afar, it looks like something else. It looks like the dismemberment of Rome, the distribution of Roman conquests to Cleopatra's children, the elevation of a foreign queen above Roman dignity, the betrayal of everything Rome stands for. And in the Senate, among the old Republican families who never accepted Antony's dominance, who remember Cicero's speeches and Cato's principles, a resistance begins to form. The Roman Empire, Latin literature, Roman law, Christian theology, was forged in the crucible of Augustus's reign. But this empire, this Antony-Ptolemaic hybrid, creates a radically different culture. Greek, not Latin, becomes the lingua franca of the entire empire. This isn't new in the East, but now it spreads westward too. Roman aristocrats, eager for advancement in Cleopatra's court, send their children to Alexandria to study Greek philosophy, mathematics, and literature. The great library of Alexandria, in our timeline burned and diminished, is instead expanded and enriched. Cleopatra endows new wings, imports scholars from across the world, makes it the intellectual capital of human civilization. Scientific knowledge, instead of being scattered and lost, is preserved and built upon. Ptolemaic astronomy, advanced for its age, gets another century of development. The works of Archimedes are not just preserved, but expanded by new generations of mathematicians. Medical knowledge from India and Egypt is systematically collected and studied. But perhaps the most profound change is religious. In our timeline, Christianity emerged from Judaism in the 1st century AD and eventually became Rome's state religion. In this timeline, the religious landscape is completely different. Antony and Cleopatra promote a syncretic cult combining Roman and Egyptian deities. Isis worship, already popular in Rome, becomes semi-official. The traditional Roman gods are identified with their Egyptian counterparts, Jupiter with Amun-Ra, Mars with Horus, Venus with Hathor. This creates a hybrid Greco-Roman Egyptian religious system that's more tolerant of diversity than the Christianity of our timeline. Judaism flourishes under Cleopatra's protection. She grants special privileges to Alexandria's massive Jewish community. When a Jewish carpenter's son begins preaching in Galilee around 30 AD, his message of universal salvation finds a very different audience in a world where the Roman emperor worships Egyptian gods and Greek philosophy is the common tongue of educated people everywhere. But empires built on partnership are fragile things. In 23 BC, Mark Antony dies. The official cause is a fever contracted during a campaign in Syria. But rumors spread immediately, poison, administered by enemies in the Senate, or possibly by Cleopatra herself, eager to rule alone. The truth is probably more mundane. He was 56 years old, had spent 40 years at war, and his body simply gave out. But the truth matters less than the perception. And the perception is that Cleopatra has arranged the death of her Roman partner to seize absolute power. The Roman legions in the West, which accepted the diarchy because Antony was one of them, react with rage. 3 legions in Gaul mutiny. Spain erupts in revolt. The Senate, seeing an opportunity, demands that Antony's legal Roman heirs, his daughters by Octavia, be recognized as co-rulers. Cleopatra responds by elevating Caesarion to full co-emperor. But Caesarion is 27 years old, has never commanded a legion, and speaks Latin with an accent. The Roman legions see him as an Egyptian pretender wearing a Roman crown. For 2 years, the empire teeters on the brink of civil war. It's only Agrippa, aging, exiled Agrippa, the man who lost at Actium but retained his honor, who prevents total collapse. He emerges from retirement to broker a compromise. Cleopatra will remain Queen of Egypt and the East. Antony's daughter Antonia will become the nominal empress of the West, with Agrippa as her regent and military commander. The empire is formally divided, not temporarily, not as a political expedient, but permanently. The East and West will henceforth have separate governments, separate armies, separate identities. It's a solution that prevents immediate civil war, but it's also the beginning of the end of unity. The Roman Empire, in this timeline, dies not in 476 AD, but in 21 BC, split into two separate civilizations that will grow increasingly alien to each other. The divided empire develops in radically different directions. The West, under Agrippa's steady if uninspired leadership, maintains Roman traditions. It builds roads, enforces Roman law, speaks Latin, worships Jupiter. It's conservative, martial, gradually becoming provincial. The East, under Cleopatra and then her heirs, explodes into a golden age. Alexandria becomes the greatest city in the world by any measure: population, wealth, learning, art. The Pharos is rebuilt even grander. New harbors accommodate trade ships from India, Arabia, even distant China. The city's population swells to over 800,000, making it twice the size of Rome. Egyptian grain, instead of feeding Rome for free as a tribute, is now sold at market prices. The profits fund spectacular building projects and scientific research. The museum and library attract the finest minds of the age. By 1 AD, Alexandrian scholars have calculated the Earth's circumference to within 2% accuracy, understood the heliocentric model of the solar system, invented basic steam engines, and developed advanced surgical techniques, including cataract operations. This Eastern Empire also expands in ways the West never imagined. Trade expeditions reach the southern tip of Africa. Egyptian ships sail directly to India, bypassing Parthian middlemen. Diplomatic missions reach China, establishing direct contact between Mediterranean and Chinese civilizations. The famous Silk Road carries not just silk, but ideas. Buddhism begins spreading westward in the 1st century AD, mixing with Greek philosophy to create Greco-Buddhist art and thought. Christianity, when it emerges, spreads primarily eastward. By 100 AD, there are Christian communities in India and Central Asia, but the faith has barely penetrated the Latin West. The religious geography of the world is reversed. The East is cosmopolitan and spiritually diverse, while the West clings to traditional Roman paganism. While the East expands through trade and culture, the West faces an existential threat it's unprepared to handle. Remember, in our timeline, Augustus established a stable Rhine-Danube frontier and crushed the Germanic tribes in a series of brutal campaigns. The disastrous loss at Teutoburg Forest in 9 AD was a setback, but the frontier held. In this timeline, the Western Empire lacks Augustus's strategic vision and Rome's full resources. The Rhine frontier is undermanned and poorly funded. And the Germanic tribes are not static. They're evolving, learning Roman tactics, uniting under charismatic leaders. In 8 AD, a confederacy of Germanic tribes crosses the frozen Rhine in the dead of winter. 3 undermanned legions are ambushed and destroyed in the forests of Gaul. The survivors retreat to Lugdunum, modern Lyon, and the Germans occupy everything north of the Seine. Agrippa is long dead by this point. The Western emperors, weak successors chosen more for family connections than ability, panic. They appeal to Alexandria for help, for money, for legions. Cleopatra's grandson, now ruling as Ptolemy XV, agrees, but the price is steep. The East will send 20,000 soldiers and the gold to pay them, but in return, the West must accept Eastern governors in key provinces, adopt Greek as an official language, and allow Egyptian grain merchants monopoly access to Western markets. It's a devil's bargain, but the West has no choice. The Eastern legions arrive, drive the Germans back across the Rhine, and stay. Key Western cities now have Eastern garrisons. Greek-speaking governors administer Roman provinces. The cultural conquest is more complete than any military invasion could have achieved. By 50 AD, the Western Empire is effectively a client state of the East, maintaining the fiction of independence while dancing to Alexandria's tune. In the year 33 AD, a Jewish preacher named Yeshua is executed by the Ptolemaic governor of Judea for sedition. His followers claim he rose from the dead. The story is not particularly unusual. Judea is full of messianic movements, apocalyptic preachers, claimed miracles. Most fade into obscurity. But this one spreads because it finds a very different religious landscape than in our timeline. The Ptolemaic East is religiously tolerant in a way the Roman West never was. Alexandria has Jewish scholars debating Greek philosophers in the museum. Egyptian priests of Isis welcome worshippers of all backgrounds. Persian Zoroastrians maintain fire temples in Syria. Into this cosmopolitan mix, Christianity spreads not as an underground movement of persecuted martyrs, but as one philosophical school among many. By 100 AD, there are Christian communities throughout the Eastern Empire, but they're diverse and decentralized. Alexandrian Christians emphasize Jesus' teachings on wisdom and knowledge, seeing him as a divine teacher in the tradition of Greek philosophy. Syrian Christians preserve Aramaic traditions and Jewish law. Ethiopian Christians mix the faith with local African spirituality. There is no central church, no unified doctrine, no pope. In the West, Christianity barely exists. The conservative Roman religious establishment, supported by the state, successfully suppresses foreign cults. Christianity is classified with Druidism and other banned religions. When it does appear, it's persecuted harshly. By 300 AD, the religious map is completely inverted from our timeline. The East is spiritually diverse with Christianity as one major religion among several. The West is rigidly pagan, worshipping traditional Roman gods. When the Western Empire finally collapses to Germanic invasions in the 5th century AD, the invaders will find a pagan Roman culture and convert it to their own Germanic paganism. Northern Europe never Christianizes. By 200 AD, it's clear which half of the divided empire is ascendant. The Ptolemaic East controls the trade routes, the learning, the wealth. Alexandria is the undisputed center of world civilization. Its population exceeds 1 million. Its libraries contain hundreds of thousands of scrolls. Its scholars are unraveling the secrets of optics, hydraulics, pneumatics. An Alexandrian engineer named Heron has invented a primitive steam engine, though it remains a curiosity rather than becoming the foundation for industrialization. The East has trade relations with China, India, East Africa, even sending exploratory missions that reach the coast of Southeast Asia. The West, by contrast, is dying. Depopulation ravages Italy as diseases from the East. Smallpox, measles, sweep through populations with no immunity. The economy, unable to compete with Eastern manufacturing, collapses into subsistence farming. Cities shrink. Literacy declines. The legions, underfunded and undermanned, can barely hold the frontiers. In 312 AD, a confederation of Germanic tribes crosses the Rhine in force. This time, there's no relief from the east. Alexandria is fighting its own war against a revived Persian Empire. The Western legions fight desperately for a decade, but they're overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Rome itself falls in 324 AD. The Senate, that ancient institution that began the Republic 7 centuries earlier, holds its final session in a besieged city, then surrenders to the Gothic King Alaric II. The fall of Rome sends shockwaves through the world, but it doesn't destroy civilization, because civilization has already moved east. The Ptolemaic Empire, centered in Alexandria, continues to thrive. It will last another 8 centuries, finally falling to Islamic conquerors in 1183 AD. But by then, it will have preserved and advanced so much knowledge that the Islamic Golden Age will be even more golden than in our timeline. So what have we lost in this timeline where Cleopatra won? We've lost the Roman Empire as we know it, the Pax Romana, the spread of Latin, Roman law, the roads and aqueducts. We've lost Christianity as a unified world religion. We've lost the entire framework of Western European civilization. No Charlemagne, no Holy Roman Empire, no medieval Christendom. The Renaissance cannot rediscover classical knowledge because that knowledge was never lost. The Enlightenment cannot rebel against church authority because there was no all-powerful church. The Industrial Revolution may come earlier or not at all. Alexandrian steam engines could have sparked it in 300 AD, or the lack of certain social pressures might have delayed it indefinitely. But we've gained something too. We've gained a world where knowledge accumulated rather than being lost and rediscovered, where scientific progress was continuous rather than interrupted by dark ages, where cultural diversity was maintained rather than being homogenized under Roman then Christian uniformity, where trade and diplomacy were valued over military conquest. Is it a better world? That's impossible to say. Different, certainly. Unrecognizable, absolutely. All because of one decision. One moment on September 2nd, 31 BC, when a woman standing on the deck of a ship watching smoke rise from a naval battle made a choice. In our world, Cleopatra sailed for Egypt. In this world, she turned her ships around. And in that turning, the future pivoted on its axis and spun off in a direction we can barely imagine. History, you see, doesn't flow like a river to an inevitable destination. It balances on knife edges, on battles that could go either way, on the courage or cowardice of single individuals. And the greatest knife edge of all was Actium, where the future of human civilization was decided by the woman who refused to run.